People with MS are twice as likely to attempt suicide. People with MS are twice as likely to complete a suicide attempt. In this video, I'm going to talk about it. Don't turn away, because that starts right now. Howdy. Thanks for learning about MS with me, Boster. I started this YouTube channel to help my own MS clinic patients learn between visits, and it's my hope that through these videos, I can help you learn too. I've made a point to not shy away from tough topics on this channel, and today we're going to talk about a serious one: suicide risk amongst people impacted by MS. I want to share with you a story about a gentleman that I took care of many years ago. He was in his late 40s. He was a former bodybuilder, and he was a huge man. He had a tremendous amount of back pain from years and years of lifting. He worked in installing wooden floors, and his passion was being a preacher. He would literally go down to impoverished or kind of scary areas in downtown Columbus, Ohio, and preach his gospel to homeless people and anyone that would listen. He was a very religious gentleman. The term in medicine is he was hyper-religious. So if I said, "How are you?" he would say, "By the grace of God, today I'm okay," stuff like that. His back pain was almost all-consuming, and I took care of him in the context of an MS clinical trial that we were running. And when he would see me, he would ask about different options for back pain. We had sent him to multiple specialists, and it seemed like nothing really worked. The last 2 times I saw him, he shared with me a profound hopelessness. He said that his MS disease and his back pain were overwhelming him, and he felt like his God had forsaken him, and he didn't understand. He said that he'd been praying constantly, and he couldn't find an answer. We had offered to refer him to counseling, and he had declined. We had tried to encourage him to take an antidepressant, and he declined. One day I got a phone call from the Columbus Police Department. They had found a man laying on a railroad track. He was decapitated. His body was otherwise untouched. And when they searched him in his pocket, the only thing they found was a bottle of the pills that I had given him for the clinical trial. And on the pill bottle was my name and my office number. It was one of the most eerie and scary calls that I've ever received. The fact that he was untouched, his body was not bruised or battered or beaten, makes us believe that he took his own life. And in my mind, I imagine him putting his head on the railroad tracks and saying, "If it's God's will that I live, he'll move my head." Now that, I have no idea if it happened, but that's the story that I play in my head. He killed himself. This is not the only patient that I've lost to suicide. People with MS are twice as likely to commit suicide, and people with MS are twice as likely to complete a suicide attempt. This is a very, very serious issue that impacts myself and impacts the people that I care for. And in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about it. Brenner and colleagues in 2016 conducted a very large study using the Swedish National Registry, where they identified over 29,000 patients with multiple sclerosis, and they compared them to 296,000 healthy controls from the general population who didn't have MS. They looked at the hazard ratio, or the risk of associated attempts at suicide and completed suicide in the two groups. And they adjusted for age, sex, educational level, and period in the calendar year. And what they found is chilling. As compared to the general Swedish population, the people impacted by MS were 2.8 times more likely to attempt suicide, almost 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. And they were 1.9 times more likely to successfully complete a suicide attempt. Educational level was inversely related to suicide attempts in non-MS patients. But amongst people impacted by MS, higher educational levels did not suggest a protective effect. Feinstein and colleagues in 2017 also explored mortality from suicide amongst people with MS. What they found mirrors what Brenner discovered, that people with MS are over twice as likely to attempt suicide compared to the general population. They also identified some really important trends. First off, the highest risk population amongst people with MS were young males in the first few years after their diagnosis. Thoughts of suicide in this study were found to be linked to depression, severity of depression, social isolation, and alcohol use. As an MS neurologist, I have lost several patients to suicide. I've also been touched by suicide in my personal life as well. This is not rare, and you are not immune. In this video, I want to share with you what we can do to help people that we care about prevent risk of suicide. So let's jump in. Let's start by reviewing risk factors that would place a given individual to be at higher risk than somebody else. And I'm talking about things above and beyond multiple sclerosis, as we've already reviewed. These include a history of depression or bipolar disorder, a history of alcoholism or drug abuse, previous suicide attempts, a family history of suicide, or a history of prior trauma or abuse. Terminal illnesses and chronic pain, recent loss, or significant life stressful events are also risk factors. Importantly, social isolation and loneliness, which is rampant in MS, is also an independent risk factor. I share these with you to help sensitize you to someone that might be at slightly higher risk or significantly higher risk. Next, I'd like us to consider warning signs, things that if you hear or see should sensitize you that you need to explore further. This would be somebody talking about suicide or discussing preoccupation with death. Someone who has recently obtained lethal means, purchasing a gun, knives, saving up a bunch of pills. If you hear someone expressing self-loathing or self-hatred, this is a warning sign. And unusual goodbyes, calls or visits that are out of the ordinary where someone is saying goodbye, should sensitize you. This is a warning sign. Self-destructive behavior, increase in alcohol or drug use, reckless driving, unprotected intercourse. These are sometimes referred to as a death wish. And if you see that, I want you to consider that this person may be hurting inside and may be contemplating suicide to some degree. Now, there are a lot of myths surrounding suicide, and before we take any steps further, I want to dispel them. There's a myth that if you talk to someone about suicide, you'll plant the idea in their head, and that's not true. There's a myth that if somebody wants to kill themselves, nothing you say can change that, and that's not true. There's a myth that only crazy people would kill themselves, and that's 100% not true. These are important myths to dispel because the first and most important thing we can do if we are concerned about someone is to speak to them right then and there. Let's talk about how you can have that conversation. For starters, I would tell someone that you care about them and that you are concerned. And I would ask them directly if they're thinking about hurting themselves or if they've had thoughts about hurting themselves. If they say yes, don't be judgmental. It's important that we're sympathetic. And I would ask them if they have a plan. This allows you to assess the severity of the risk. Someone who tells you they recently purchased a gun and they plan to go home and kill themselves is in a very different mind state than someone who says they would not hurt themselves. No, it's just something they've been thinking a lot about. If you are concerned that someone is in imminent danger of hurting themselves, I don't recommend leaving them alone. I recommend staying with them and reaching out for help. Whether that's calling 911 or a 1-800 number like the National Suicide Hotline. The National Suicide Hotline is open 24/7, 365 days a year, with experts that are ready to help you or help a loved one grapple with this very serious problem. Ultimately, you might be the only thing standing between someone's thoughts of suicide and actions in attempting suicide. My name's Aaron Boster, and thank you for learning about MS with me. I didn't shy away from this topic, and I don't want you to either. We can help one another. And if someone is hurting so bad that they're thinking about hurting themselves, I want us to be there to support one another. Thank you for listening to this video, and I look forward to reading your comments and questions. And at the end of the video, you'll see several 1-800 numbers to reach out for national suicide hotlines. Until my next video or live stream, thank you and take care.